I think we can get started. Close the doors. Ready, set, go. Everybody feeling energized, hopefully, somewhat. Thank you so much for joining this session. It's exciting for us because actually this is kind of the sequel of a session that we held last year together with Simon and Andreas, where they kind of spontaneously produced 10 best practices on successful startup corporate collaboration. And then we thought, hey, this is pretty good. And instead of sort of racing through this in a presentation as it was last year and barely anyone can retain it, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's elaborate those points and let's create a playbook based on the experience of Ypsomed and many, many years actually working on these collaborations, both with the hat of a startup as well now with the hat of a corporate, engaging with startups, and together tease out what the key collaboration success factors are in this space. Now, why is it important? Of course, we want to build a stronger Switzerland, we want to be the innovation nation, and it's not just about generating good research and ideas, but we need to be able to translate those into the market and bring innovation into the real world. This is about translating innovation into products, into value creation, into growth, and ultimately into impact. And increasingly, this translation happens through these collaborations between entrepreneurs and corporates, which means between agility and scale. So the startups bring the speed, they bring the boldness, they bring the new technologies, but established companies bring the industrial know-how, the regulatory expertise, customer access, manufacturing capabilities, and the ability to scale globally. So this is very, very important. However, these collaborations are often harder than expected for various reasons. And often it's the same dynamics that apply, and we'll go a little bit deeper into these dynamics. It's about strategic alignment. It's about speed versus structure, different cultures, IP questions, go-to-market tensions, and managing dependencies. So this session is really about how Switzerland can build stronger bridges between entrepreneurship and industry. So this playbook, as I mentioned, was created precisely to address these challenges, and it is intended as a practical guide for more effective collaboration between startups and corporates. And it's grounded not only in theory, as I mentioned, but actually in the actual practice and experience, operational experience of Ypsomed. So I'm very pleased to welcome Simon Michel, CEO of Ypsomed, to introduce us to the playbook and to give you a quick rundown of how we will structure this session. He will give us about 10 minutes insight into what the playbook is all about and why they decided to co-author this with us. And then we will go into a discussion with with his innovation, the person responsible for innovation at Ypsomed, as well as another person with a lot of experience in the space. And you will be warmly invited to also participate in this conversation, bring your examples, bring your questions, etc. So if you have any, keep them for later, and then we'll have a very interactive session. So thank you so much, Simon. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joya. And thank you for organizing this. I think it's actually great to see that we get the bigger room this year. So thanks for the interest. You all got a printout. If you don't have a printout yet, it's online. You can download those 10 advices that we developed over time together with Startup Days and the team. So I'm here today with Andreas. We worked together for over a decade in innovation. He has the biggest budget in the company to spend on innovation, one of the biggest budgets in the company to spend on innovation. And we are here together with you in order to show you how we tackle innovation and how important the relationship and the collaboration is with young enterprises. So just very quickly what we do, I think it's important in the context to understand. We are the world leader in manufacturing injection devices. This doesn't necessarily seem so innovative, but we have over 400 patent families in that space. There's more and more patents. I think every year we file roughly 40 patents. So there's more and more stuff coming in order how you bring a drug through a device into the body. So innovation keeps very important to us. Different platforms. Our customers are big pharma biotech companies. We are a B2B company, a medtech company listed in Switzerland. We have a steep growth. We have presented our figures yesterday. We grow at 15% CAGR until the end of the decade. We target $1 billion, so we can slowly start to call us corporate, even though our spirit is more like yours. We feel entrepreneurial, where we tend to get processes, as Joya presented in the beginning, that tend to make us a bit slower. So we enjoy collaborating with young and innovative, fast teams. We are a global company. We are not only innovative innovator. We spend a larger double-digit million amount of money in innovation per year. We have manufacturing spaces in Switzerland, in Germany, in the EU, in China, and in the US. We have a lot of tailwind in our industry. That's important. I mean, you can only innovate when there is a market out there. We will not deepen that, but therapies go from hospital to home. More drugs have to be injected. Drugs can be copied, and there's a new drug class out there. It's called the incretins, the GLP-1s, how to lose weight. That gives us a lot of push in our business, a lot of cash also to spend in innovation. But we also have some tailwinds, and we also have some headwinds, some elements that stop us, that make us slower. Our industry is highly interesting. We make EBIT margins above 30%. So there is new competition coming. At the moment, we are 2 players worldwide. We split the market. There are more and more players coming, especially in China. IP is running out on some of our core platforms in the mid-30s. So we must innovate, continue to bring clients onto a new S-curve, onto a new product line to motivate them to change with us the product line in order we keep IP protection for another decade or 2. We have more players in the space that aggregate, and all this together leads to cost pressure. So we have this need. If I look at Ypsomed, we always discuss 4 pillars. We have our platforms, that's where we build upon. If a customer comes, we can multiply a platform. That's the logic how we work. We have the innovation piece, where we invest money in new platforms. Operational excellence is very close to us. We want to get our processes faster and better, and of course, the responsibility not only in the ecological space, but also in the financial space. So, innovation is core to survive. Innovation is core to us to be and stay number 1. And if you look into other industries, that's very common. Over 80% of corporates would say collaboration with other companies, collaboration with partners, collaboration with universities, with schools, but also with startups is important to continue to grow. And this is also what we have seen over the past decade. You will not get everything done in-house. So you reach out, and at a certain size, you get braver, and you start projects. You start maybe with InnoSwiss, and then you go on, until you actually really collaborate with startups. But there's a statistic, and we found this figure, that over 70% of all those relationships actually fail. And we also had some failures, so we thought together with Joya, why not share this experience with you? And we have built this playbook, and you have these 10 rules, and there might be other elements you will all add to it, and we are very happy to work on that and get the 11th or 12th or kick one out. I just quickly run through those 10, and then hand over to the team, and we go into Q&A, and we discuss them. So, align on strategic and shared vision very early on. You know, if a company wants to conquer a market globally, and you bring a small feature, is it the right vision? Do we go into do you have the same logic, the same intent? Clarify the go-to-market model. Will you be a part of it, or will big corporate be the company who sells it? Will there ever be startup name on it, or will it be Ypsomed forever? So work on the joint roadmap, work on the brand visibility. Do you want to have your brand on the product that your partner is going to sell or not? Is it really necessary? Maybe it's proud, you want to have it on, but is it really necessary to be successful? Is it only a piece you sell? Define IP rights. There is co-development on the way. You develop stuff together. Who owns the IP? Who can use the IP? Is it joint IP? This has to be clarified in written very early on. Avoid lock-ins and manage mutual dependencies. A lock-in could be that the timeline of big corporate is, in 5 years I have to launch this new product. But you as a startup, you have your next finance round in 12 months. So a total this. So you need to align on that. Otherwise you are locked in. You are fully dependent, but you run out of money. Ensure continuities through strategic anchoring on both sides. We will deepen on that, discuss exits early on, maybe on a high level, but it's about the feel, you know. Do you want to sell your company? Do you want a licensing deal? You just want to have money? Do you want to be a supplier? So this logic relationship should be clear. If you know what you want, it's not necessarily that corporate knows what you want. You have to express it, you have to name it, you have to write it down, you have to propose it. I think that's very, very important. Agree on evaluation paths very early on. So if we should ever sell it to you, if this could be a potential exit, how would we value it? Is it an EBITDA multiple? Well, you don't make EBITDA yet, so how? Is it comparable? You have to talk about that. And last but not least, we heard it before, cultural differences. There might be other rules, other logics, how a corporate works and a corporate runs as you run your company. This was very quick, but I think it's now time to have the team here on stage and go through those elements and try to explain on a couple of real-world examples on how we went through Ypsomed and others, how we went through in that space and what we lived and what we have learned as practical as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. I'll actually welcome to the stage the two speakers. So Andreas Schneider, we already heard from Ypsomed. He also co-authored the playbook and has first-hand experience building these collaborations. And Vincent Earling, founder of Capsly, who works closely with startups, SMEs, and corporates across innovation products and projects. So he also invests in startups. So, and Simon, you just chime in. But I think before we get started on our conversation, I'm actually very curious and always very curious who's in the room. So we can actually tailor this conversation a little bit to who's in the room. So first of all, who in the room is a startup or represents a startup? Okay. Who represents a corporate? Okay. And who represents some sort of enabler, facilitator? Okay. So we have a good third. Who in the room has active experiences in this space, either from the startup side or from the corporate side? Okay, a few of you. So I'm going to ask you very first, like, what does that trigger in you? Does anyone have a reaction to that? And I see you nodding, so I'm just going to put you on the spot. Oh, wait, and we have a microphone because this is being recorded, I was told here. Yes.
I'm working at the University della Svizzera Italiana in Lugano, and I was working regarding technology transfer with Inno-Swiss a lot, try to match the research done in the university and local company needs. And also now I'm doing the same with startup. And from the beginning, we start to play startup in the value chain of some industry, otherwise they are lost.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Does anyone right now want to share a first reaction to those 10 points that Simon really literally ran through? But otherwise, we will launch into the conversation. Oh, yes, there is a reaction. Please. And maybe briefly present yourself so we know where you come from.
My name is Claudia Nash. I work with PNTS. I'm partner attorney, so I work very long in tech transfer, and I also do collaboration negotiations for clients for PNTS. What I like with your points is not just the points itself, but the emphasis on clear this from the start, because there's a lot of aggravation happening later if that is not clear from the start, and some points are more important than others. Obviously, define IP rights and boundaries, but also others that you have the clear vision where this is actually going. But at the beginning, everybody just wants to get the project started, and all the talk around it and coming to an agreement is seen as a hurdle and just taking time because we want to start. So I think that's very important advice to bring that.
Thank you for this comment, which I think is exactly the reason we actually made this playbook, to help jump the learning curve, so to say. But what is you two's reaction to the comment she just made about the timing of clarifying these points? Maybe I'll start with you, Andreas, and then we'll go to Vincent.
It resonates very well with an example I've prepared for this conversation. So yes, try to clarify early on, but also keep tracking and maintaining whether you're sharing that same vision and mission. And one example we've prepared for today is collaboration we had with a small startup in the space of digital health and connected devices. I mean, as Simon pointed out, we are quite a niche player when it comes to managing and manufacturing, developing these self-injection devices. And of course, over the last couple of years, there was a lot of discussion around making those smart, making those connected. And in order to integrate those devices into a broader digital ecosystem, we, of course, entered a couple of collaborations with digital health players. And to your point, as to clarify early, but also then keep track on how that evolves over time, there was an example where we initially were very clear with the startup, hey, we're developing a digital health ecosystem that is regulated as a medical device. It's class 2. We have clear roles and responsibilities between startup and corporate Ypsomed in that example as to who's doing what, how do we manage post-market surveillance, etc., etc. But then we realized over time, startups pivot, and that startup pivoted. They realized that if you're trapped into this medical device story, valuation multiples become a little different than if you were a direct-to-patient, consumerized kind of player. So what they've tried to do is to try to pivot away from being a regulated to a non-regulated player. And of course, that started to diverge quite substantially from the initial get-go, the initial vision we had. So yes, I think I agree. Early clarifying is important, but keep sessions to continuously track whether we're still on, to see whether we're still on track is as important as, initial clarification as what the goals really are. I think that was an example where, initially it felt like, oh, we are well on track. We get those 10 rules, but we then realized things started to drift apart a bit over time. For various reasons, the startup became under pressure financially. They were preparing a next financing round, and they realized, wow, if I get that label of a medical device manufacturer, it's not as sexy anymore because cost structures look a little different compared to becoming that, consumerized wellness player that they eventually then wanted to become.
I think, and I'll direct the question to you in a second, but I think what I hear you say is you can actually do this all right. And nonetheless, things might change. So maybe to you, Vincent, since you also work with corporates, actually advise corporates on how to engage with startups, how can they prepare for that? How can prepare for the somewhat unpredictable path of a startup and also build flexibility into the importance of clarification early on?
Yeah, I mean, that's not an easy question to answer, but maybe on the first point, I had two things that I wanted to share. My first reaction was what I really liked about those 10 points is that they really clearly show that you need both parties. This is not just a list of what the startup should do, like have a clear commercial model, have clearly defined what are the benefits to the corporate, but it really shows each point of that basically shows it's a negotiation or discussion between startup and corporate. So it's not one-sided. That was the one thing. And regarding the timing, because that was my second thought, it sort of presumes that we are already at a stage where we already met. So the startup and the corporate already know each other, and then they start those discussions. What is missing a little bit, a lot of things are happening before that. And also, especially on the corporate side, and I think I'm not sure if now I can bring back the link to your question. I think what is important on the corporate side is that they define for themselves what are the strategic imperatives, what do they want to achieve, and then go out and look for startups that really help them to solve this exactly and don't just do it opportunistically, because then the corporate also might lose interest throughout the process. I think that way they're much more committed to that. And maybe the first part, the aligned strategy and shared vision, is already more clear, because let's face it, a corporate will not be dictated by a startup what's going to be their vision, right? You as a corporate, you have your vision, you have your strategy, you have certain points that you want to achieve. And yes, on a project level, you need to define certain goals together and hopefully stick to it. But as you said, you never know with a pivot if something changes. But then let's also think about why would the startup pivot? If the collaboration works well with a big corporate, you would not really give them a reason to pivot. And that's why I think it's so important from a corporate side that you define those things early on. So it's, I mean, I think
do your homework is what I hear. Do your homework before. Now, I think you're alluding, or some of what you were alluding here too, is like point, I think, 10, which is also a matter of cultural differences. And I have a question to you, Andreas. I mean, Ipsomed, and you mentioned it, Simon, is kind of transitioning out of being a startup into becoming a corporate, or it's kind of already a corporate, depending on the definition, but wants to keep the culture, as I can hear very clearly, of a startup. To what extent does it help Ipsomed when engaging with startups to be still close to the reality of the startup and prepare differently or manage the relationship differently?
It's a very good question, and I think it's also the nature of the industry we are in that we need certain structure. I mean, it's life-saving therapies that we help to bring onto the patient. So a certain level of structure and process is actually mandated and very much desired also from a patient's safety standpoint. So there's a certain level of discussion that we can just forget about it. There's not even to debate about. But you're absolutely right that the reason why we engage with startups at times is not only access to new technologies, because typically that is what we are looking for, but it's also maybe getting inspired about new ways of working. Right, Simon? I mean, what we're doing with some of the digital health players, as an example, is also to learn about, hey, how do they build in this agility? What can we take from that beyond taking the technology as such and try to integrate that into our products, our future platforms? It's also trying to get inspired by the way of working, speaking of new technologies that we are maybe a little bit less familiar with. So that is an important element to that. The question then is, how do we scale that from, say, a loosely managed innovation strategy kind of angle into scaling things up? Because ultimately, again, we are in a regulated industry, so there needs to be certain conversion towards structure processes. We can still learn, but I think also the both parties have to adapt.
Maybe on that, where do startups and established companies most commonly misunderstand each other? In your experience, Vincent?
I think the challenge is often for the startups and the founders really to understand the decision-making process and all the parties that are involved. Maybe also if we come back to the 10 points here, we see point 1 is, for example, a more strategic or maybe C-level thing. We have sales in there with go-to-market. The roadmap depends whether that's R&D, for example. You have branding, marketing in there. So that already means for a startup to navigate all these different departments and interests, that's super complex. And if you think of founders that are just coming out of university, they've never worked in a corporate. So they don't know how that works really, right? And I think this can lead at least to different expectations on the startup side, where they think, okay, we spoke to this person and they're all thumbs up, they really want to go for it, but they don't really know what the implication actually is for the corporate. This is now just starting the process internally, which then takes long, going through, let's say, legal, procurement, IT, or whatever, which is then, that creates a lot of friction, I think, between the startup and the corporate, because the processes are not streamlined, they are not startup friendly in a corporate.
How do you, Andreas, then manage this, let's say, misalignment of understanding? How do you handhold the corporate to get a better grasp and understanding of the complexity and the various stakeholders that need to be involved in the process?
So the first thing we do, we try to define very clear interfaces towards that outside world, collaboration, startups, communities. So we have, individuals that are basically responsible to reach out, to liaise with these outside world organizations that may help us achieve those goals.
Is that you?
It's not me, it's part of our team, yes. And I think that also brings me to the second point. I think an advice that I have is also know the decision makers. That guy managing that relationship maybe is not the owner of the budget. So know how the decisions are being made at the corporate ends. And also those decision makers, they might change over time, right? If you talk about a, say, joint roadmap, that roadmap might run through different departments. I, as sort of owning the innovation budget, I might take it to a certain point, but then handing things over, a colleague of mine will step in, and he might have different, or she might have different views on it. So know the decision makers and also know that pathway as how is it supposed to be scaled within the corporate. And there are a couple of examples also we sort of prepared for today that, this third element around define a joint roadmap with clear stage gates. I would really emphasize the stage and the gates. So have clear decision criteria up front. Clarify those up front. Put it into the contract. Know what exactly market validation means. Know what it means if Ypsomed's going to run around and test your ideas with a couple of selected pharmas. Do you have insights into that? Do you trust that Ypsomed does present your technology the way you feel about it? So those kind of nitty-gritty details matter quite a lot, whether things going to ultimately be effective or not.
I want to get a quick check of the pulse in the room. Are there any thoughts that come up? I'll take you since we've had the mic over here, and you, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Phil. I work in construction, and for us it's basically part of the business model on bringing those small SMEs onto our platform. And I wanted to ask you, what recommendations do you have for these one decision makers? Because mostly it's like one guy in a company that has all the responsibilities and can do these easy decisions. But for them, it's often like a strategic decision. Like they want to be more innovative as a construction company, so they want to work with us. So how can we encourage them to do that step with us before
Very
even talking
sector.
about these points? Yeah.
This is going back to what you said. What happens before we get to this? What's both of your piece of advice? Maybe Vincent, you start.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know your company specifically, but I think it makes sense if you can somehow go out there and say what kind of things you're interested in so that they know, okay, you're a relevant player that is open. So positioning yourself in the market like a strategic partner that offers something. It's also a thing of what can a corporate offer to the startups, right? And being aware of that, what are actually the benefits that you can bring, but making that very concrete maybe, right? So that they have a touch point. And then regarding the decision makers, I think if it's easy in your organization for them to make those decisions, if they have the budget and the authority to push this through, let's say, I guess for them it's important that this is also aligned with the strategy. So they also need to know what is really the long-term strategy and what are the priorities or what are the innovation challenges the company is facing, right? So that there's an alignment so that they don't take the risk to onboard a startup, let's say, that's then completely misaligned with the strategy, I think.
If I may slightly rephrase this question and point it to you, you mentioned one decision maker, but who is the decision maker when you embark in a collaboration with a startup? Where's the entry door? Once you get through that door, how do you actually get to walk through that door? Who else needs to be brought on board before it can actually happen?
I think part is what I sort of commented on before, that decision maker, it could actually be different or multiple decision makers along that path, right? So I think it's therefore super important that we have that strategic anchoring on the both ends. If you feel like this is going to scale beyond innovation, don't talk to innovation only, but ensure that we have, the profit and loss, responsibles also aligned, that we talk to our C-level and have clarity on why is it even needed? What's our shared problem statement? Why is it even that you guys reach out to us? Do you understand the path we are on? Is that aligned with the kind of trajectory that the startup is on? So really this one decision maker is probably a tricky one to answer because it might also change along that path, along that trajectory of scaling things from initial exploratory pilots towards large-scale market introduction.
Thank you. I'll take the next question here.
Cool. Thank you very much. This is a really insightful conversation, and I'm learning a lot. One thing that came to mind when I saw those points are that they're relevant over the whole life cycle of the startup. And my company, Alterion, raised over 200 million. And those points were true the day when we founded 8 years ago. They're true today. What changes is the negotiation power you have on the startup side, right? Because when you start off, like you have no access to the market and you're almost dependent on those larger companies with distribution models to bring yourself to market. So really relevant for the whole life cycle. One point I want to make is that I maybe like a bit less is point 9, because we did not agree on a valuation path, and that's probably why we're still here today. We're able to raise so much and grow the business to $3-digit million-dollar revenue. And I would encourage the entrepreneurs here, and I know maybe the corporates will like this less, be audacious, be courageous, and try to push your company further. You can always collaborate with corporates, but we also need innovation that comes from the bottom. So I'd encourage you to maybe not discuss this so openly, be bold, discuss the other 9 points, and grow your company yourself.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And you are one of the mentors of Project Switzerland, which we heard just about on stage. So very relevant. Maybe is there a reaction on that valuation point?
Partially agree, yeah. Partially agree. I think also what we have is sort of to comment on that is avoid lock-ins, right? I mean, also something we experience often is corporates that try to sort of just tie up those startups for eternity. And that is definitely not beneficial for the both ends. What we typically do is we try to time box things, that we have certain stage gates, but it's clearly linked with certain timelines. And that also comes with a certain need to act from a corporate's perspective. That that, for instance, exclusivity rights, they are time bound. And if you don't manage to proceed within that time frame, the startup is good to go again. Sort of, maybe it is not quite addressing your point, but I think, nevertheless, be bold as startups, yes, absolutely. But also understand, these reasons why we reach out as corporates to startups might be a bit different from your motivation why you liaise with the corporates in first. And that's why about 70+% of startups are not overly happy with those collaborations, simply because there's sort of a, by design, misalignment in why we even start to collaborate.
I'll make a follow-up question. I'll hand you already the microphone for the next one, but I do have a question on this point, because one topic we discussed in our preparation was innovation theater. And I got a bit of a red flag earlier when you said, yeah, we also want to learn from the culture. Is that serious intention on the part of the corporate in engaging with the startup? And what are the signals for a startup to know that the corporate is actually serious and committed to the partnership? Maybe Vincent.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something we see with big corporates, rather in terms of accelerators, where I've noticed that, where corporates sponsor accelerator programs, but there's not really a direct benefit to them. That's, to me, part of like the innovation theater. It's more like marketing, a bit of entertainment for the employees. They can go to these events, they can act as advisors to the startups, and it's cool to work with motivated founders and things like that, but there's never really a commercial relationship or R&D relationship. So that's why I'm a bit like cautious of these programs and the involvement of big companies there if it's not really tied to a concrete project. What is for Kickstart is a good example there, I would say, in Switzerland, where corporates are involved there, but they really start pilot projects at the end of the program. So I think there I would be careful as a startup to see if it's really just a waste of time, because I mean, resources in startups are super limited. If they are wasting time with this, you are basically killing startups. So then please rather don't do anything with startups at all.
Thank you.
Let me get back to you on this. So I mean, clearly, if the main and only reason is we want to learn how you build software, probably that's not enough for Simon to sort of approve that anyways. So clearly we have certain decision criteria that move beyond that. But whether you're on the right track or whether you're just sort of supporting this innovation theater, I think there are a couple of early warning signs for startups to take very serious, right? First is really, is there a shared problem statement? I mean, why on earth is it that you're relevant to us, or why do you believe Ypsomed should be concerned about that? Say, example again, we have that particular device technology, we have those trends in the pharma pipeline, we need desperately this new syringe technology, but we just happen not to have it. Where there's a clear need why we need to engage with a startup versus we're just experimenting a bit, sounds nice, but why even bother? And that is linked also with do you get senior management exposure? Do you get to talk to those guys who own the budgets? And also, is there a willingness of the corporates to move along, because time kills deals? And the longer the corporates sort of, just maneuver around, try to maybe postpone that decision, that most often is an early warning sign that is not as mission critical as you might think.
I think this is really relevant advice. I'll take your question.
So jumping off from the timing point that you just mentioned, so as also a startup founder, the biggest challenge that we found working with SMEs is exactly that, so a mismatch in timing. We as startups want to move a lot faster, and we have to move faster. So do you have any advice that you could give to us as startups to basically kind of push the corporates a little bit in their timelines, or just ensure that they're more comfortable with a shorter timeline?
You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, pushing always helps. The matter is, how mission critical is it again? And, there, to your point, I think that is very much linked with the kind of uniqueness of the value prop that you offer as a startup. If you're able to push that through, I mean, of course, that's going to help. At the same time, you also have to accept that there are certain rhythms. As a corporate, you're not going to just reinvent the wheel for the sake of building that relationship with a single one startup. Some are a bit better prepared than others. They have those structures. They have that agility by design. But I think particularly those corporates who are maybe a little less, experienced collaborating with startups, they might also be at times a bit overwhelmed, just dealing with startups as if it was yet another supplier or partner out there, not aware of that you might run out of money within the next 6 months, and you need to deal now. And if you just link it to the budgeting cycle that happens to be in November 26, it's just too late.
Maybe, I think, Simon, you wanted to jump in. Yeah.
I think it's key that you try to find and have an open dialogue with your sponsor. So, and if you have your point of contact, if you feel this relationship, if it becomes a sponsor internally who wants to push you, ask him or her every question. So, do you have the budget? No, actually I don't. So what is your next gate? Well, actually, no, we have our budget cycle is November. Just ask. I mean, if you don't have this level of trust with your sponsor, your contact, it's anyway an issue. So you must have somebody, and then you ask, and as much as possible. But I think it's very valid. You cannot eventually you cannot push, because we have our programs. He runs 100 innovation programs in parallel. You're one of it. So, yeah, maybe he can push you. But you ask. I think that is important.
Very good point. We have a question here in the front.
First of all, I would like to apologize for limping in lately. I got lost for a moment in this building, which is not easy to navigate. I'm exotic in here. I come from the state side. The background is the foreign ministry. Since a couple of years on the road with geopolitical advice, geopolitical due diligence, we call that, giving companies the big picture in a market or a region. It will not surprise you when I come and say the 10th point is address cultural difference proactively. I would move that a little bit up and broaden it into what is going to be the situation in my future markets and with my future investors. Obviously, when you are you know from the very beginning that the Swiss market is too small and that you will have to export. I think it's very much an upstream necessity to do that. There are quite a few examples for that. Or on a big macro level, the EU thought we can't import Russian gas any longer. Let's take it from Qatar. What happens? Nobody counted with that. The Iranians bombarded the Qatari side of their gas, and it's going to be dead for quite some time to come. But it also happens on a company level. I know of companies who have had money from the Gulf, especially Dubai, not to speak of Saudi Arabia. This will dry up totally. I'm putting this black and white, but Dubai is over.
Yeah.
So my question is, shouldn't be not only cultural differences, but the geopolitical, especially at this time, when we know the geopolitical situation changes practically from day to day, shouldn't that be done a little earlier? See what the international environment is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I love this question, but I also know we have a whole session dedicated to this. Actually, I believe in this room right after this, and you are one of the speakers. So actually, and I'm not doing this because it's not a relevant question, but we have literally 3 minutes left, and I have an agenda. And my agenda is to now transition briefly to InnoSwiss, our National Innovation Agency, which actually has concrete tools to support startup corporate collaborations and make that easier, because we're very lucky in Switzerland that we have a strong innovation agency that makes that path slightly less risky. So please, I want to just briefly ask Christoph Falk to the stage and just say a few words about what you offer, so you all go home, in case you don't know that yet, with some concrete pieces of advice on how you can get started.
Thank you very much, Joya. Thank you very much also for putting more spotlight on this topic. When we are at these type of events, we typically talk about pitch training, about patent strategies, about term sheets, and so on. And this is actually a very, very powerful collaboration, right? That doesn't get the spotlight sometimes that it deserves. There's also a lot of potential in this type of collaborations, right? And that is still untapped. And we see that also in our figures when we look at the projects that we support. We see that only 5% are actually innovation projects between startups and SMEs, like together, genuine collaboration, working on co-developing a product, for example. And at the same time, now we talk more about SMEs, like the smaller companies, right, up to 250 FTEs. We have at least, according to a survey, 50% of them, over 50% actually, do have innovative ideas, but they do not pursue them, just because they obviously also there is a lack of financing and so on, but also because of the lack of competencies. And I think here, talk to the startups here. You could really be part of the solution there. You are really one lever, to help also them, the SMEs, and to make this then a success for both of you, for both parties. And InnoSwiss, now the segue to what we do. We obviously we can be a platform there. We have non-dilutive money. We have grants that we give to startups that we can give to startups. Obviously in collaboration again with SMEs, for example, in order to cover some of their R&D activities and to help you move forward with your product or service. But not only that, in case you don't find an SME, for example, or a corporate you can work with, we also have startup innovation projects, for example, where you actually, as a mono-beneficiary, can profit from. And on top of that, we also have other services, advisory services, and now I'm going back to Kevin, for example. He's also part of it. We have coachings, we have trainings, where we help actually develop startups, develop the company, and make you successful on a global scale.
Thank you so much, Christoph. And I think my takeaway here, and so thank you everyone, thank you Simon also for working on this playbook, which by the way is also available. I think you mentioned it on our website, on the website of the Swiss Startup Days. A few are lying around. Take that seriously. But I think what I think is, okay, so take this as a guideline, including for the questions you want to ask when engaging with the partner on both sides. This is a good guideline for questions that you can formulate around those points. And you know a little bit what you want to get at, when you want to make, you have to cover your bases. The other point is get the help you can get. Take the help you can get. Don't get distracted, but take the help you can get, whether that's in the form of mentorship of those who've already done it, coaching, or actually getting support with the grant financing on the part of InnoSwiss. And I'll give you the final word. Make it good. And then I think we're done.
Just one remark I wanted to make, because we're talking a lot about strategic alignments. We talked a lot about it from the side of the corporate. And what I find a lot with clients that I support is that they sometimes need to think how this partnerships fits into their own strategy. And when you talked here, you talked a lot, does the startup fit into our company? And do we have the common vision more together? But the startup may have different partners as well, so they may have 10 collaborations. So my advice to the startups also be to actually analyze yourself and see what is actually my core IP that I cannot give into this collaboration, and what can I give? And then really to have a clear collaboration and to be upfront at the start as well. So when we talk about strategic alignment, the startups need to think about their own strategy as well, and not only do they fit into the SME strategy, because that also can be a recipe for disaster.
Sure.
So, sorry,
This is a great point. I don't like the last word of recipe for disaster. Let's talk about recipes for success.
I'm a big fan.
And I'm really sorry, no more. But is it really good? Because people are waiting out there for the next session. Okay, so this is a worthwhile point. You all have to pay attention. It's the best point made in today's panel. It's coming up right now. It'll be worth it.
Okay, so this is something that I've, because of my love for Switzerland, I want to share. So before starting up my company 2 years ago, I was an IT director in Novartis for 8 years, and I worked directly with startups onboarding into Novartis. One of the things that I think is missing that both corporates like yourselves and startups should consider, number 11, is the regulatory landscape of the company. Because I've been in many situations where I tried to onboard startups, but because they're not validated systems, they're not 1 CSP, GXP, they're out. I've also been in other situations where we've onboarded accelerator applications in Geneva to Novartis, 4.1 million, but we couldn't kick off. We couldn't go to market. Why? FDA, EMA did not validate it. We spent a lot of money to validate that startup system. So an advice to startups is make sure as early as you can, understand the regulatory landscape of that corporate and prepare your systems in advance. And for corporates, be ready, because once you're a huge, big-time corporate, audits will not treat you as good enough. You're going to be now, hey, you got to meet these FDA GXP standards. So something to consider so that you don't sell to market late. And I want you guys to be successful. That's why I'm sharing this experience.
Thank you. Okay, this was good. And I think also we know we need another session on this next year, because clearly there's a lot of interest, lots of learnings, lots of peer learning. So join us again next year. Thank you very much.